Trigun Maximum, Volume 3. Here's my book review, summary, analysis, whatever. This one was mostly just one big fight, so I hope and pray that I can make this video shorter than my other ones, because by the time that I get done with like Trimax Volume 14, these videos are going to be 3 hours long. Volume 3 picks up right where we left off. So Volume 2 ended with Vash and Wolfwood facing off against two of the gung-ho guns, Leonoff the Puppet Master and Gray the Nine Lives. Oh, my spoiler ban for Volume 6 through 14 still holds. I've read up to Volume 5, so please don't discuss anything past Volume 5 in the comments. Okay, yeah, so I was setting the scene for where Volume 2 ended. Okay, we're on ship 3. We don't know what happened to the people there. All that we know is that the gung-ho guns are there, and that's a problem. So, yeah, Vash is, like, crying blood, and Leonoff the Puppet Master is puppet mastering. And then Gray the Nine Lives bursts through the floor underneath Wolfwood, and that was where Volume 2 ended. Okay, right into the middle of the action. And Wolfwood immediately, like, I guess flashes back to Vash, telling him not to kill, telling him that he gives up hope so easily. And so he, like, looks to Vash, I think, thinking, what should I do? What would he have me to do? I don't know, he could just be looking at Vash because they're partners in a fight, you know, I don't know. As Wolfwood is preoccupied, he gets slammed into the wall. We're fully in the fight now. It takes tons of bullets to even slow Gray down. Wolfwood is able to knock him off the bridge, like catwalk thing that they're on, and thinks for a minute that might be enough to kill him. We all know better. He's not dead. Wolfwood is having this imaginary conversation with Vash in his head as he's fighting. Vash is really living in his head rent-free because he's just like thinking all this stuff to Vash. Can't you see, like, they want you dead, what will you do now? Like, you're gonna have to kill them type of thing. Classic Wolfwood behavior. Vash himself is faring pretty well against the Puppet Master. He dismantles his giant, like, puppet abomination fairly easily with some sharpshooting. But noticeably, he's only aiming at limbs and not taking any headshots. Even with a puppet, he is not going for the kill. And once Vash does away with the giant puppet, Leonoff just sprouts wings, okay, and flies away and is, like, ominously observing Vash from afar. Like, he's very much like Knives, but very much not like Knives. Great observation. Okay, you get a sticker for that or something, I don't know. But he thinks to himself that even though Vash and Knives look human, the most inhuman thing about Vash is his emptiness. Ooh, because the weight of the rage and the sorrow that he carries would cause any human to buckle. And instead of being awed or scared by this, by Vash, Leonoff is like, I just want to turn him into the most magnificent puppet ever. Somehow, I don't think that would fly with Knives. Remember what he did to Legato when Legato wanted to kill Vash? Yeah. I don't know if you can tell, I think that Leonoff the Puppet Master is a very, corny? Goofy? I just feel like he's very goofy. Compared to some of the other intensity of several of the other confrontations that we've seen with the gung-ho guns, like Vash choosing to spare Monev, and then Dominique choosing death over returning to Legato, and the whole fight with Raide, which was more of like a ideological fight than like a physical fight. Granted, the confrontation with E.G. the Mind was not important. But, like, I don't know, I just find this section with Leonoff the Puppet Master pretty goofy. And that's not to say that there's not anything there worth analyzing or worth looking at. It's just, there's 12 gung-ho guns, alright? They can't all be bangers. Some of them I'm gonna like less than others. Some of them I'm gonna think serve the story less than others. I'm gonna draw this comparison so many times, but Leonoff just reminds me of Goob from Meet the Robinsons. I'll explain this later, okay? But Goob from Meet the Robinsons is goofy and cringy, like, on purpose. That's part of the point. But I feel like Leonoff is that way, but, like, trying to play it straight. That was completely off script. I'm trying to make a shorter video. Let me get back to this. Wolfwood is just taking a smoke break on a bridge in the bowels of the ship. Good for him, honestly. And he's just, like, pondering, smoking, chilling. There's something so pleasant. I say this all the time. I just like, there's something so pleasant to me about the way that he is drawn. The lines of him, like the shape of him. Look at his cool shoes. Look how nice his hands are. I can tell that Naito-sensei loves drawing Wolfwood, and that just comes through the page. And then I love looking at his drawings of Wolfwood. He's drawn with love, and you can tell. This little monologue here makes no sense. So I consulted a fan translation, the TRIGUN Overhaul Project, to see how they translated it, and I think their translation works a lot better. I'm assuming it's just a case of overly literal translation of idioms, but shout out to the guys at the Overhaul Project for all the work that they do. And I hope that the eventual TRIGUN reprint that we will get, trust me on this, we will get it. I hope that that reprint, it fixes some of the clunky translation. So here he says, as he's, you know, taking his little smoke break, he says, "A man does not change. The name remains long after the body is no longer bound to the flesh. When the blood is drained, the muscle stripped from the bone, nothing beautiful enters here." That's reality for you. So far, so good. That's not so bad. But then he says, "Till death, the outer road tastes like the outer road." Girl, what? But the Overhaul Project translation says, "The world doesn't change. Your name might remain, even long after you die, but your ideals join you in the grave. Nothing good ever lasts in this world. That's just reality for you. You can keep on walking down this road till you bite the dust, but nothing will ever change." That works. That sounds so much better. And it's a shame that the first translation is so nonsensical, because it really should be like a significant moment, but it sounds so silly. And I don't know if that fan translation, the Overhaul translation, is 100% accurate, but it's a localization that works, because it at least turns it into something that sounds good, that makes sense, and that's more of like a distillation of Wolfwood's perspective on life, and kind of a continuation of the conversation that he's having with Vash in his head. But either way you want to take the translation, whether it's "nothing good ever lasts in this world" or "nothing beautiful enters here," like, I get it, but also I'm like, Wolfwood, you're saying nothing beautiful ever can last? Not the desert sunset, not the friends that you're making, not Vash, not the kids? I don't know, is that just his regret talking? Is it fatalism? Is it a jab at Vash, saying he can't last the way that he is? I don't know, I just think there's a huge difference between good in this world doesn't last, therefore what's the point, or therefore we should abandon it, versus good doesn't last, therefore we must do what we can to preserve it. And I think that Wolfwood wants so hard to believe in that latter phrase, right? Like, good doesn't last, so we have to try to preserve it. That is his whole motivation. Everything that he does is for his kids, right? And so I believe that he does believe that there can be good in this world. He just doesn't see it the same way that Vash does, and it like confuses him. Because, yeah, like I said, Vash is always just living in Wolfwood's head rent-free because he doesn't understand him. And because Wolfwood is suffering from so much like internal turmoil all the time, and Vash is kind of showing that there's another way, Wolfwood is just trying to constantly prove him wrong or get him to change his beliefs or something, because he can't bear being in that tension. On to chapter 2. Cement. That's concrete, baby. In Legato Land, I don't know where he is. I don't need to know. I don't really want to know. The less I know about Legato, the better. Legato is so, like, Yagami light-coated. Like, look at this. Also, what is that? What is that? That thing that's, like, carrying him around is massive. And there's, like, these giant human-shaped holes in the architecture. Did it crawl out of that hole? Reverse Junji Ito? Bruh. In Legato Land, Legato is not happy that Chapel seems to have had a change of heart and is fighting alongside Vash. So he gives Nine Lives permission to deal with Wolfwood in whatever way that he wants. And Legato and Gray seem to think that Wolfwood has just completely turned traitor. And I don't know what to think. He's not fully on board with Vash at this point, but like fighting alongside Vash is better than fighting against him. And so I think even if Wolfwood doesn't know like where he stands, at this point he could still act with either party as if he's been playing some sort of long con. Back to the fight. Gray finds Wolfwood again and just starts tweaking, screaming traitor, 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 traitor over and over and over again in different fonts. I should have picked up on that. But Wolfwood is fighting for his absolute life. There's a real sense of danger on the page. You can tell it's taking everything Wolfwood has got. He's unloading like so much lead into this guy, and it's not really doing anything. It's not that Nine Lives is bulletproof. The bullets are going into his flesh. It's just not enough to stop him. The way the paneling is arranged, you can tell that Wolfwood is on his back foot the whole time. I love the way he fights. Like, he's just got so much grit, trash-talking Nine Lives. Even when he's barely holding it together. He's got ribs crunching and gets blasted like 50 feet away by an explosive, but he just keeps getting up. I was like crying laughing at this panel. I saved this image on my desktop. I didn't even put it in a folder. I saved this image as glue trap Wolfwood. So after the blast, Wolfwood is down to fighting with his pistol. The Punisher is far out of reach, and Gray is still tweaking. I'm gonna stick to saying Nine Lives. I feel like that works better. Nine Lives is still tweaking. But Wolfwood is a very clever fighter. So he counters the next explosive projectile with a bullet, which knocks 9 lives back. It explodes and knocks 9 lives back. Then with him like pushed further back into the area that Wolfwood wants him to be, he pulls a lever and brings down an industrial door down onto 9 lives, which completely like severs his arm off. It's like, I tend to read through action sequences pretty quick because there's no words and I'm just looking at pictures, but this one I did slow down to appreciate the flow of the action. Like, I would love to see this fight animated because the version of it that exists in my head looks really, really good. So the severed arm with a door trick gives Wolfwood enough time to get the Punisher, but naturally 9 lives gets the door back up and is back at it again with one arm. So Wolfwood uses the flip side of the Punisher, the rocket launcher side, I don't think we've seen him use that yet, to blast him again, and then that's where we get the infamous Desperado reference. To me, this is fuel for the Latino Wolfwood agenda. And this rocket does massive damage to 9 lives. Like, his bones are jutting out, guts spilling everywhere, but he just won't stop. Look at how sick this is. This is so cool. This looks like The Thing. I love body horror. But when the 9 lives gets close enough, Wolfwood uses the long end of the Punisher to just spear it through the chest. This goes crazy. So hopefully, that is the end of Greater Than 9 Lives. I don't know how you could survive that. Meanwhile, the Puppet Master lures Vash away, like, deeper into the ship. And after all the wild fighting and the gore happening on Wolfwood's side of things, the darkness and the silence are pretty eerie. Vash is now using both his revolver and his arm gun. He is on high alert, and he enters a house with his firearms ready, but there's a family on the other side. And they look a little bit startled, but then they smile and they all pull guns on him because they're puppets too. The baby with the gun, I was losing it, dude. That's so funny. So Vash disarms the puppets, no headshots, as usual, but not before they get the chance to fire at him too. And it's pretty clear that Leonov is taunting him, like using puppets that either look like people that he knows or look human enough that he is gonna hesitate to shoot them. And then a huge crowd of people fleeing from the puppets rushes past him, but it turns out the fleeing people are actually also puppets. Everything's a puppet. Your mom's a puppet. But there is a human girl mixed in with all the puppets, and I'm not sure if Vash accidentally shoots her or if she gets caught in the crossfire, but as soon as he realizes that she's there, he's shocked and worried and tries to administer first aid. And it looks like she's just been injured in like the shoulder. Like, I think she was going to be okay. But Vash is pissed now, and he tells Leonov that the game is up. But he addresses Leonov not as Leonov, but as Emilio the player. Leonov is like, I don't know who that is. And Vash is like, yes you do. It's you. And you've hidden away all your memories of who you were. And he starts listing off like all these other names. And when he says the name Isabel, Leonov just flips out and sends even more puppets after Vash. Where is he getting these? You can't control all these puppets at once. Like, it just doesn't work. And there's a puppet that looks like Vash's sensei as well. He leads the charge of the puppets and calls Vash a demon, which is, such a low blow. Vash is carrying this wounded girl, and he does not have the wherewithal or the bullets or the space or the free arms to fight back, so he just runs. And the puppets catch up eventually, and he does his best to fight back and keep the girl safe. So he climbs to the top of one of the ship's spires and shoots out the sprinkler system, which drenches all the puppets and their control wires, and the added weight of all that water shreds Emilio's fingers, because he has like the wires wrapped around his fingers. I don't think that's how puppeteering works. Like, every time I've seen a marionette, it's always just been like the little cross thing. Okay, it doesn't have to be realistic. It doesn't have to be realistic. I don't think I would be so critical of this if I just didn't think that Emilio was just really dumb and annoying. So, okay, I will suspend my disbelief. The water weighs down the puppets and the strings and shreds Emilio's fingers like a cheese cutter. And Vash tells him, your art is just a mockery of life. This is not art. You're a demon. So true. So real. And he says, I can endure you no longer. That's such a fantastic insult. He's not mad or upset or sad, but he's just like, you are so annoying and I'm done with you. Me too, Vash. So Leonov / Emilio is all shriveled at the ground, pitiful at Vash's feet, and he's like, are you gonna kill me? And Vash seems maybe a little resentful that he can't kill him. He's not angry like he was with Monev, where in the heat of a fight, he's like grappling against his violent urges. He's much more collected. It just seems like he can't stand Leonoff, and he knows that he deserves judgment, but he still says, no, I'm not gonna kill you. But have you really forgotten Isabel? Don't you remember your father's bread? And at Isabel's name, Emilio freaks out again and runs away. He's very, very childish, and that's part of the reason why I say that he reminds me of Goob from Meet the Robinsons, because basically we find out a little bit later that Vash knew Emilio when Emilio was a kid. So, like, the Goob thing is spot on, actually. He's this young kid with an obsessive personality who turns into a gross old man with an obsessive personality and never learned how to grow up or, like, move past a tragic situation in their life, and so they're just in this, like, stunted, childlike state. Elsewhere on the ship, Brad. Y'all remember Brad? He's been sneaking around in the ducts of the ship, and he can't find anyone, but he finds scattered puppet parts, and then comes across this, like, mountain of puppet boxes, and at the box in the top of the mountain is an ornate puppet of a beautiful young lady. Back to Wolfwood, who's exhausted and bloody on the ground next to the mangled corpse of Gray the Nine Lives. This thing is absolutely shredded, ribs popping out, the head is gone. Like, there's no way it's still alive. But Wolfwood does not seem so sure, and I cannot blame him for that. He's sitting there absolutely wiped next to this corpse. And he's thinking of his children again. He's always thinking about those kids. Me too, dude. I don't know if maybe he is close to death, and so he's, like, seeing visions of them. Or maybe he's thinking about them to, like, give himself the strength to keep going. Thinking about the lengths he would go to save them in order to fuel his drive to keep fighting to protect the people that Vash loves. And then a couple of people crawl out of the Nine Lives corpse. So it turns out Gray the Nine Lives is actually 9 very small dudes in a suit. The suit that's like part meat, part robot, piloted internally. And when I first saw, like, the bizarre shape of this creature, I was expecting a science experiment gone wrong backstory, but it turned out to be more of a bunch of kids in a trench coat situation. And when Wolfwood, like, sees these people crawling out of this gory mess, he just freaks out. That's a big theme in this volume. Everyone is, like, freaking out constantly. Except for Vash. Vash is, like, the only person that can keep his head. So Wolfwood freaks out and, like, smashes this guy to death with his fists. Okay, it's pretty nasty. The puppet master flees to the room where Brad is with the big stack of caskets and puppets and tries to prevent him from interfering with the girl in the casket at the top of the pile. So Brad obviously sees that that's going to be his weak spot and tries to use this girl as leverage against the puppet master. But the puppet horde catches up and the whole pile comes crashing down, and one of the caskets pops open and there's a decomposing body inside. And then the whole bottom part of the ship falls off, and Emilio is left dangling from one of his wires, which is not attached to any part of the ship, but is actually held by Vash. And Vash is at the top holding onto the wire, and Emilio is dangling from the wire with one hand, and holding onto a string that's holding onto Isabel's coffin with the other hand. And then her coffin falls, and Leonoff Emilio starts tweaking yet again, as if we hadn't had enough of that, and stabs Vash's hand with a tiny little puppet, which makes him let go of the string, and then Emilio plummets to his death. What about the wings? Did his wings get destroyed? Did I miss that? Like, could he have saved himself with his wings? Okay, so I have not been able to determine what actually happened to his wings. If I find a panel where the wings are clearly destroyed, then that makes sense. If I don't, then that adds a different layer to that if the wings were there and he could have flown away. Also, I have not been able to figure out what happened to that girl that was wounded in the puppet fiasco. Still waiting to hear about her. After Emilio falls to his death, we get a single panel flashback of Vash walking alongside a young boy who's holding, like, a little marionette, and Vash is saying, "You should tell her how you feel, Emilio." Back to Wolfwood's situation, one of the nine lives almost gets the drop on him, but of all things that could happen in that moment, Millie and Meryl save the day by falling through the roof on top of the guy. And Millie's like, "Hey, Wolfwood!" And he's like, "Huh?" Honestly, I think being around Millie and Vash is so good for Wolfwood. He's, like, so high-strung and serious a lot of the time. I mean, he has his goofy moments, but I'm just imagining the awful mental and physical state he was just in. And then for the girls to just drop in, literally a sign from above, like, "Okay, it's over. You don't have to keep doing this." It was probably just such a relief to see the girls and know that it's over now. Chapter 6 opens with the Knives piano spread. Okay, look at this. Stampede needs to do this. They're doing the piano stuff already. Good for them. I need them to put knives in this thing. Honestly, the Stampede team was crazy for everything they did with knives and the piano. They took this one panel, right? Or maybe there's a few other instances of him playing the piano and expand it into this, not just like an iconic hobby for him to have, but something that's horrifying and tragic and that shapes the entire soundtrack and shapes the whole narrative as a metaphor, a conduit for us to experience the brothers' relationship through the piano. Knives, piano, panel, you will always be famous. So Vash wakes up in a hospital bed across the room from Wolfwood, who is also unconscious in a hospital bed. Millie and Meryl are happy to see them, but there's also this other girl, Jessica, who just starts like screaming and crying and hugging him, and you know, it's a lot. And a lot of the other Ship 3 residents are there as well, and they inform him that of the 480 residents of Ship 3, 170 were lost as victims of the gung-ho guns. Vash blames himself, of course, and apologizes for not getting there sooner and for dragging everyone into this with him. Unintentionally, but still, because it's his home, they were targeted. But Louita, yeah, Louita! She's there, and she shuts that down immediately. She's like, nuh-uh. If it weren't for you and Wolfwood, everybody would be dead. You cannot be blaming yourself for this. You saved us. So 2 of the 9 lives are still alive and in custody awaiting interrogation. And Vash asks about Sensei. Sensei was the one who found Vash in the desert 70 years ago and like brought him into the ship. But Louita does not answer Vash's question. So I think we can assume he did not meet a very good end. But she tells Vash to rest and to be gentle with himself because he is family. Once everybody leaves, Wolfwood wakes up. Vash is so real for this. I too make that face every time I see Wolfwood. And Vash thanks Wolfwood for everything, for protecting his people. And Wolfwood deflects that. He's like, I'm not like you or the peaceful people here. Like, I killed a bunch of people rather violently. And like, you have the guts to say thank you to me? And Vash is like, yeah, I couldn't have done it without you. You saved them. You saved us. So thank you. Wolfwood, instead of accepting the thanks or anything like that, he's just like, you piss me off. And he doesn't say this to Vash, but he's thinking it. He's like, you're immortal. You should have figured this out by now. Like, why are you so naive? That girl, Jessica, accidentally drops a locket that has a picture inside of it, and Wolfwood sees a picture of Vash looking the same as ever, with a very young Jessica, probably like, I don't know, 4 years old. I can't help but think that there are parallels between Emilio and Jessica. Both of them are people that Vash knew when they were very young, and both of them seem to have an obsession with someone. Jessica, I think, is a teenager or maybe a young adult. I think that's understandable that she would have a silly but inappropriate crush on someone older than her, especially someone who's not just kind to her and not just her personal hero, but someone who everyone loves. I think Vash seems to handle this awkwardness fairly well. You know, he's kind enough not to cut her off, but like, he's not gonna just let her indulge that crush. You know, if anything, I think that Jessica and Brad should get together. Not because I'm a shipper or anything, but I feel like those are the type of characters that an author would just pair together. I feel like they would just get along, I don't know. Okay, so once Vash is well enough to be out of the hospital, he and the people of Ship 3 are cleaning up from the fight, and Vash finds half a coin in one of the puppets' hands. A man goes down to the dungeon to kill the 2 prisoners. Not in a sense of justice, but in revenge. He says he wants to splatter them to bits. And Louita clowns on Wolfwood for smoking and makes him throw away his cigarette. And he's like, dude, it's not even lit. And she's like, get that out of here. Wolfwood, I think, is much worse off than Vash because he's still on an IV and he's carrying this thing around like it's the Punisher. Okay, Wolfwood wants to know everything that Louita is willing to tell him about Vash. We find out from her that Ship 3 found Vash 70 years ago, stranded in the desert, missing an arm, on death's door, and they didn't think that he would survive, but he did, and made a miraculous recovery once he was in a certain part of the ship. And the coat that he's wearing in these flashbacks, dude, pouting Vash. Are you a baby? The coat that he's wearing here and here looks like his Stampede coat. It's shorter and has that standing up collar thing. I don't know what you call that. Now, Wolfwood thinks that maybe because Vash has seen so many people live and die while he just stays the same, that maybe his way of living is an attempt at absolution. That he's planning to die as some form of redemption. But Luida's like, nah, Vash won't die. He's not even using his immortality powers. Like, if he was, he wouldn't have all those horrible scars. You've seen him. You've seen how busted that boy is. So Vash, meanwhile, is taking Millie and Meryl to see the cryosleep chamber, where many of the ship's residents are still sleeping. He thinks about Rem and thinks about how he still has so much left to do. And Luida gets a message that the prisoners have escaped, and then Wolfwood immediately goes to find the girls, thinking that they're going to be the target of the escaped 9 Lives prisoners. And he shows up just in time to save Vash and the girls from the 2 9 Lives. And Vash was wildly unprepared for a fight at the time and lost his bulletproof coat and his arm in the scuffle. But Wolfwood easily incapacitates the 9 Lives by just standing on them and scolding Vash. And I love to see them in civilian clothes. Wolfwood's just wearing like jeans and a sweater. I love it. In Vash too, he just has his hair down, all casual, and it's so cute. So Vash immediately sends people to check on anyone who might have been in harm's way from the escaped prisoners. And Wolfwood just kind of watches him, just amazed that he cares so much for everyone, that throughout all of this he can keep smiling. And it's not his fake smile either. It's not the fake smile that Wolfwood called him out on years ago. It's real. Now that he's in his home and with his people, we see a different side of Vash. Or maybe not a different side of him, but rather Wolfwood is able to contextualize Vash differently now that he understands the environment that he comes from. This is where Wolfwood begins to understand Vash. And is not trying to challenge his worldview or make him see reality, but he's just like seeing Vash for who he is. This will probably be the point where they start to actually become friends. Like I think I said in the last video, they're not friends yet. Like Vash does not let his walls down. He doesn't ever really explain much about himself to Wolfwood or talk about himself much. So I think that Wolfwood is only now starting to understand him after talking to someone who knows him well and has known him for a long time and has like an outside but less subjective perspective on him. Vash has seen so much death that he doesn't want to add any more death to the world. And he's lost so much that he doesn't want to see anyone else lose anything. And so finally Wolfwood is able to see him as both a gunman and a fighter, but also someone who clings to the bright side of life. He's a lover and a fighter. Those two things don't have to contradict. Or maybe they do inherently contradict, and that's what makes Vash so beautiful and compelling. It's like what one of the greatest philosophers of our time once said. Wayman Wang from Everything Everywhere All at Once. When I choose to see the good side of things, I'm not being naive. It is strategic and necessary. It's how I've learned to survive through everything. Strategic and necessary. That's exactly what it is. And that's where the volume ends. I think certainly the fact that Vash thanked Wolfwood for fighting, even though he killed, is softening Wolfwood up. But overall, this fight sequence had a much different flavor to the fight in the previous volume. In volume 2, the 3-piece set of Raide, Vash, and Wolfwood was entirely about whose ideology prevails. The one in this one is just a fight to survive. I still think that it has ideological significance, with Vash playing out his ideology, his pacifism, and nonviolence to a T. And people are dying, but he's still trying to save as many people as possible, including Emilio. But we also see Wolfwood in his element too, where he's fighting tooth and nail to protect the innocent. And although I think he's afraid that Vash might be unhappy with his methods, he is still fighting for Vash and for the people on the ship and for his kids. And so I think when they each emerge from their respective battles, they have a new understanding of each other. And they also are able to just be happy to be alive and appreciate that they saved as many people as they could, even if it was a tragic situation. Alright, so that's 6 gung-ho guns down and 6 to go. We've got through Monev, E.G. the Mine, Dominique the Cyclops, Raide the Blade, Leonoff the Puppet Master, and Gray the 9 Lives. So who's left? We got Mid-Valley, of course. Love that horn freak. Hopper the Gauntlet. Wolfwood, I guess. Zazie the Beast. Oh, what's his name? Not Legato. I don't think Legato counts. Levio. Bruh. Yeah, Levio's got to show up at some point. And then... oh, Elendira? I don't know what syllable the emphasis is supposed to be on. I read it Elendira. I could be wrong. But that would make 12. I'm so excited for Levio to show up. I want to see the boy. I realize I've been pronouncing his name as Livio, which is like so American and probably wrong because both I's should be pronounced as a long I, so Livio it is. But yeah, that was volume 3. Volume 4 coming next. I'm working on some really fun stuff to come soon, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye. Oh, yikes. I just dropped my book.